Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. Hey guys, this is the third video about the new soundboard here at Hope Fellowship, the Allen and Heath QU16. In this video, we're going to take a little more in-depth tour around the board. We're going to talk about inputs and gain staging, and we're going to talk about a little bit more in-depth about EQing. Okay, we're going to do a quick tour of the board. Bear in mind, I'm still finding my way around this board, but I'll show you a couple of sort of the big hot button places that you're going to need to know when you are mixing here at church. So we briefly talked about processing, but that's kind of your view here on the screen of what sort of the details of each of the channels. So you've got kind of the, a view of the input volume here, and that's also this meter. You've got 48 volt phantom power button here. So please note that that's not available anywhere on the surface. That is actually on the screen. So if you need phantom power for a channel, it's going to be there. There is this channel 1-2 linked button. So one thing you can do is when you press that, we're going to link it and we're going to hit apply. And what that's going to do is down here, now these two faders are linked. So they are a stereo pair, which is cool. And when you unmute them, you can do that. So say you had like a keyboard at the front that had two outputs on it, like a left and a right, and you actually wanted to do that. You put them into say 1 and 2, and now you have to worry about one fader instead of having to worry about two. The EQ settings will follow both those channels at the same time. Mutes, of course. So that's what that is. I actually don't want that for this channel, so I'm going to turn it off and unmute too, or mute too. We talked about the select button and what that does, right? And it puts different channels up there on the meter, and it routes that channel through this area. You can actually also route the main mix, right? So if you hit select on left and right, then your main mix. So you can actually put an EQ curve on the main mix. Now again, when you press the select button, it's going to route that channel up here. You can also route, say, the main mix up to there. So if you press the select button here in the main mix, it's going to put the main mix up there for you. You can mute the main mix. So if you just need to kill everything, that'll do it. So back to a channel. So again, you've got this, they must have a fancy name for it, but this sort of mixer area or channel strip area where you've got your input gain, you've got a high pass filter, you've got a parametric EQ, you've got a gate, you've got a compressor, and then you've got pan settings. So we talked about layers in a previous video, so I won't dive into that. Suffice to say, just a reminder that to get to the computer, the stereo channels, you got to press this top layer here, and then they're accessed in this first thing there. The labels are per these layers. So to get back to our regular sort of channels 1 to 16, it's this bottom layer. Stereo channels are at the top. Then you've got the main left and right mix here. If you need access to the monitor mixes, that you need to press mix 1 or mix 2. Mix 4 is going to be our video output to the video, and then back to our main mix. And again, then when you do that, it's these faders that you use to send individual channel volumes to that mix, and then back to the main mix. Okay, let's briefly talk a little bit about inputs and gain staging. So we talked about the select button. We talked about how when you do that, it routes it up here. So that gives you access then to the gain knob, the input, and a bunch of other stuff. So I want to point out just about what's called gain staging, and that's getting the input of the instrument or the microphone ready so that the mixer has enough volume to use. And the previous board that we had didn't have the ability to really show us what the input volume was. It gave us the signal thing, but it didn't show us the input volume. So you can see when I've got processing selected and I've got this channel selected, when I talk into the microphone, we've got a nice healthy level here. And you do want to try to get it above, that says -40, somewhere in between -40 and 0, right, is where you kind of want to get that thing to sit. Now if I really shout, and I can get that thing up a little higher. But I'm talking right into the mic, and that's a nice healthy volume for the board. Something else I'll show you is this PAFL button. If you press this, it's going to route that input volume to this meter here, which is handy. So I'm going to take that. So a couple of things about this area then is, now that we've got a good healthy level to work with, there's a couple of things that you might want to note. One is the high pass filter. High pass filter, you basically want that on, so press in, for any instrument that's not a kick drum or a bass. I guess in our case, or the keyboard. Often the keyboard, you want to disengage it. But the high pass filter is going to let all of the high frequencies pass. Okay, that's what that means. So when I adjust it, you're seeing that it's actually really hard to tell what frequency that is. So you kind of got to read the little numbers at the bottom. That's probably at about 100, something like that. Most instruments, you'll just want to leave it. You just want to turn it on and leave it. Let's see what the default is. Yeah, just turn it on. It's probably about 80 hertz. It's gonna basically take everything, all the frequencies below that out, which for most instruments, that's just gonna get rid of any rumble in the microphones, and it's gonna clean up your mix quite a bit. So that's a high pass filter. The parametric EQ is this area, and you've got quite a bit more control than we did before. And there's a little picture of it. I don't know if you can grab it from here. Anyway, but if I touch parametric EQ, that kind of shows up. If I start fiddling with it, no, okay. So then it's actually showing your settings down here. It's got a bit of a curve up here. So I'm going to talk into the mic while we do this, and maybe you'll hear it in the video. So let's say I need to, so I've got low frequency, low mids, high mids, and high frequency. So these are all your trebles. This is bass to treble frequency. So if you want some more lows, you can just grab this gain knob and boost the lows. If you don't want so many lows, you can drop that out and it'll drop it out. If you want some more highs, of course, you can take this gain knob and just crank it, and now there's a lot more sibilance and a lot more air in my voice, or drop it out and all the clarity's gone. Looks like they've got, so 70 is about 80 hertz for the low, 200 hertz for the low mid. That's all. Low mids are going to be your warmth or woofiness if you got too much in there, or boxiness. If you got an acoustic guitar that's really woofy, you can pull that out, and that's going to clean it up a bit. Same thing with a voice. If you need just a little bit more warmth, say on a female vocal, you might want to just pull a little bit of that in, something like that. 2.5 hertz, which is what they've got the gain knob, or the high mid set at. That's going to be a lot of clarity and presence. So you might, if you need some more presence, you can add that in. Again, if you've got too much presence or too much harshness, you might pull that back. And then highs are going to be clarity and some air. So that's that top one there. Just real quick on a couple of handy frequency ranges, like we talked about 70, or so yeah, the sort of 70, 80 hertz for your high pass filter, low frequency roll off. 80 hertz, 50, 60 hertz and or 80 hertz is often a good spot for a kick drum, like the low, like punch of a kick. 200, again, it can be anywhere from 150 to 250, but somewhere in that range is going to be a spot where there's some either warmth or boxiness if it's too much, or woofiness. So I am often using that frequency. In your high mids, if you're in somewhere in the 800 to 1500 range, I find is where a lot of nasaliness or harshness is for vocals. And so I tend to wind up taking that out. So what I would do is I would probably find this high mids. I would find the frequency knob, and I would adjust it. So it's in the maybe 1 kilohertz range, and then I would duck that out a bit. So that's what that is. And anywhere between 2.5 and 3.5 kilohertz is going to be presence. You do got to be careful with that. Adding too much presence is going to maybe cause some feedback. At about 7 kilohertz, you're getting what's called sibilance, so the S's in people's words is there, but it can add some breathiness and air. Anything sort of 10 kilohertz and higher is going to add some air and clarity without adding too much in the presence area, in that 3 kilohertz area. And so that can be handy to just add some clarity there, or take it out if you need. One other note, with this parametric EQ is that you've got the 4 bands, right? Low, mid, high, mid, and high. You've got the gain knob for each of them. You've got which frequency is affected by the gain knob. And then you've got this width setting. And if we watch this high mid, this I'm finding, see how it's kind of a fairly broad scoop. I would tend to want to make that narrower. So if I dial that up, you'll see that change in how much of the frequencies around that center frequency are affected. So I might want like a fairly narrow notch there, and I want to just pull that out, say. So that's what that width is for. All right, so we've been fiddling here, and I'm going to show you before I shut this down, just that reset again. So we're going to go back to scenes, hit that Hope Fellowship scene, hit recall, and hit yes. And we're back to normal. There's no EQing on that channel. All the faders are at 0 and or muted. The stereo channels coming from the computer are muted. The main fader is down on all the mixes. Oh, not all the mixes. I lied. Hey guys, thanks for checking out these videos. Happy mixing.